Hello and welcome to episode 123 of the Arena Regulars podcast. I'm Zach,
And I'm Jeff.
and we're a source for drunken Magic the Gathering arena content.
That's right. Just a couple of regular dudes drinking some irregular beers and talking about Magic the Gathering, in particular, the online client MTG Arena.
And we have something special planned for this week. Something brand
Mhm.
new. It's actually kind of a little experiment to see if this is something we want to do in the future. So we'll get to that shortly. But first, each week we both bring a beer, we drink Jeff's, then drink mine, rate them on a scale of bronze to mythic, and choose the best for last. So with that, Jeff, what's on tap?
All right. Last week we got taken over by Sawdust City Brewing
Mhm.
Company. So we are continuing with some of their stuff. This is Papa Janu, which is actually in collaboration. Zach pointed this out to me right before the show, the Second Wedge Brewing, which is a brewery that we have tried before. Um, I will say no more than
A
that.
brewery we have tried before.
um, the I wanted to bring this one on the show because it's Maibach, which is a really interesting beer style. And uh, basically, the way I think of it is it's like a German IPA. Like it is to German beers what IPAs would be to American beers. So
Mhm.
it's a little higher percentage and a little hoppier, but it's definitely still got the like German beer underpinnings. You can tell it's not an IPA. It's
Mhm.
different, but that's kind of the way to think about it. Uh,
Nice.
yeah. So this one's 7%.
That's right. And it has a picture of Sasquatch on the front with some mushrooms, throwing a hint at the Sasquatch hops in the beer. So
Hmm.
sweet. All right, let's crack it open, Jeff. All right. As we pour this, we have some magic news. So the anthologies are now on Arena. If you want to hear us talk about those or shit on those, we talked about that last week. So go back to that episode. But as they uploaded these onto Arena, and with that like update yesterday, there were some changes to alchemy
Yeah.
that they didn't tell anyone about. So first off, they banned a card in alchemy, which is strange because it's supposed to be the format where you don't ban cards, you just nerf them. So they finally decided to ban Fable of the Mirror Breaker, which seems odd to do it now and whatever. Um, but more so, just strange that they banned it altogether, and why they didn't rebalance it when it was banned in standard just seems bizarre to me. Um, but I don't know.
Yes. Yeah,
They're
this was
like,
weird. Like I thought I missed something because I just logged in and it told me the card's banned. And then I thought sometimes I get really old ban messages. I don't know if you get this, but
mhm.
I'll like log in and it'll say, "Oh, just so you know, this card's banned in standard." I was like, "What?" It's been months, but okay, thank you. So I assumed it was that, and then I realized, like, oh, actually, it says alchemy on it. Um, yeah, so I was pretty surprised. I wonder if this means they just couldn't tweak it in a way that didn't either ruin the card or make it still too good. Um,
Basically, so this is all happening as Arena's like updating in the morning, and they waited until the afternoon to actually post an article explaining what's happening,
mhm.
which is usually not how they do things. Usually they like to
Yeah,
tell you first and then it happens. So everyone was super confused on Twitter. It was just crazy. Um, but I think their reasoning was basically, hey, alchemy is still rotating the same as standard used to, so it's still only the 2 years, right? Because they have a different team that works on alchemy than on standard. So they just decided to ban it outright because it wasn't worth putting in the time to try to tweak it for a month. Which my question is, why do anything and just let rotation deal with it? Like, what?
yeah.
I don't.
Also, tweaks would affect historic, right?
That's true. Tweaks would also affect historic, so that was probably a
Yeah.
big case for it too. I just don't really see why they didn't just wait till
Just
rotation.
yeah, just do nothing for your month out of rotation.
Yeah, like whatever.
Well, other than the other change they made, make that one. Maybe that's it. They're making the other change. So
They thought, let's change it up anyway. Which that other change is finally Crucius has been nerfed. Crucius is the egregious pirate Rakdos card that does a bunch of fucking shit. But basically, it went from a 3/3 to a 3/1, which is actually huge
yeah,
because it can actually be like easily dealt with in combat. You can cut it down now. There's a bunch of cards that
yeah,
kill it.
that makes it much worse. That's it.
Yeah.
This is a good change. I still remember when we were doing like research for we wanted to talk about alchemy, and we
Mm-hmm.
were doing research for it, and I think we were just looking at some deck lists, like we weren't going super deep or anything, and I just read this card and I was like, what the hell is this? Like, how did anyone ever think that this was a reasonable card to put into a format where red and black are already good?
Yeah, it's also the thing that like, and this is the reason why we're not going to stay on alchemy very long. We don't talk about alchemy very much, and the reason is because of the
Cards like
way,
this.
not just cards like this, but because it took this long for them to actually nerf this card.
Right.
Because
It
when
took
did
me
this?
1 second of reading it to realize this card was too good. But it takes what, a year to
Yeah, because
action on it?
this card was out for more than a year, right? Didn't this
Mhm.
come in with like? I feel like it came in. Maybe it was more Dominaria United or like I actually don't remember when this card came out, so that's probably a bad thing to say.
It's
Um,
hard to remember because this is like a pirate card, but it came in a set that has nothing to do with pirates, right?
exactly.
Like,
So it's one of those confusing ones where it's like I
it
knew
was
it.
Brothers War.
Okay, so it wasn't a whole year. It felt like a whole year because this card was dominating, and they could have easily done something about this card. Like as soon as it like dominates and something needs to happen with it, the whole point of nerfing cards and having digital cards is that you can change them quickly. And when they
Exactly.
don't change them quickly, it just this is like the number one reason myself and many people were not playing alchemy. So
Yeah.
anyway, it's
Now I'm sure it's all about just jamming the One Ring into every single deck. But
yeah, like all the other formats right now. So
yeah,
but we don't have to deal with it. Yeah.
no One Ring here.
Nope. That's because we're talking all about standard. That's right.
Yeah.
It's basically we've been kind of calling this like our summer of standard because that's all we've been playing since the draft format is not necessarily something that we're interested in since it doesn't help our collections as
Mhm.
non-alchemy historic players. Um, so, Jeff, I want you to explain our little experiment, but we have something special. We think it's special. It seems exciting. So, Jeff,
Yeah.
what are we doing exactly?
It's gonna be a lot of fun
Mhm.
for us, at least. Okay, so what we're doing is we picked a deck list. Um, we'll talk about what it is in a second. So we have a deck list that's in standard. What we're going to do is I'm going to play it and Zach's going to play it. And we're going to talk about it. We've done that. And we're going to talk about it a little bit today. But then what's going to happen is we're both just going to kind of take the deck in whatever direction we want to. So Zach will
Mhm.
add cards he likes or remove cards he doesn't like, and I'll do the same. And then we're going to kind of check back in later and find out just how different the lists we end up with are, or how similar.
Mhm. Yes. Uh, this is just kind of came from an idea of like what could we do with standard and what would be a fun thing, and how often we don't really get to play the exact same deck list and talk about the exact cards we're sideboarding in and out and what we think the good matchups are and the bad matchups are. Because sometimes we just play different decks. And so this
Mhm.
was a way to kind of force us to do one and then see what we think the deck should be doing instead of what they are doing.
Yeah.
Um, so we pick something fairly stock and fairly straightforward as far as like um, the cards in it are very
Yeah,
there's
I think the idea was we picked a deck list that we knew like needed some work in a
yeah.
sense, or
Hmm.
had a lot of room to change it if you
Hmm.
want to. Um, so it's kind of like we both pick up a deck and then we start to customize and build and improve and iterate on it. And we're just going to see what happens when we both do that
Yeah.
separately.
So, and we haven't really talked about it at all before this moment. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And if this is something that we like and also you like, but more importantly, we like, we'll probably do it whenever new sets come out and things like that. So, or there's like a new deck that would work for this type of experience.
And also, it was important to me that we didn't pick like a tier 1 deck or anything
Mhm.
either, that are, again, we want it to not already be optimized,
Yeah.
because then it feels like we're taking tier 1 decks and like making them worse, and like
Yeah.
who who dragged them through the mud less.
Yeah. But we also didn't want to pick a deck that was so off meta that it's like never going to win a game and is not good.
Yeah,
And
because
then,
that's not fun for anyone.
yeah, specific things like werewolves or like something like that, where you're like kind of tribe focused and you're like kind of, you're very limited to the cards you can actually pick because they have to have a word on them. And so it's not as fun. Like the card pool gets smaller immediately. So Jeff, what deck archetype did we pick for this?
Okay, it's only fitting, given the origins of the show and our love of Dimir rogues, that we stuck to our favorite quote unquote color pair here, and that is Dimir. So the deck list that we're going to start from is a very stock Dimir mid-range deck that's just kind of like 3 of this, 4 of that, 4 of that, 4 of that, 3 of this, 4 of that. And it's I think Zach, you found this list somewhere or
Yeah.
put it together.
Yeah,
it's as soon as you sent it to me, I was like, that's the perfect list, because there's so much room. There's so many good cards in these colors. There's so much room to innovate and like take it a certain direction, and lots of cards you can cut, lots of cards you can add. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see where this goes.
And this is also interesting. We had a someone in our Discord had asked us recently, like, how many times should you play with a specific iteration of a deck before changing it? And that kind of sparked a little bit of, this is something we had already thought about, and then it kind of gave us a interesting idea, like, oh, like, when do you get the chance to just like play a deck? And this last week we were forced to never change anything. You have to play it as is for a whole week, so that so that we can have this talk and decide, what we think is good and bad and what we want to change, and then give the time to actually change it. Because now, after playing it for a whole week, I am itching to change things.
I know, I keep like wanting to
do something,
make
and you're
some
like,
swaps.
nope, I can't. So kind of a quick run through, like, this is very stock. And so basically, the main deck, we're playing like Fairy Mastermind, Tenacious Underdog, Urtai Resurrected, and Shieldred the Apocalypse. Then we have 2 Planeswalkers, which is Kaito Shizuki and then Liliana of the Veil. And then we're just playing like Cut Down, Go for the Throat, Make Disappear, and Siphon Insight. So
it's literally all of the non-land cards. That's it.
Those are the cards. So there's like mainly 3 and 4 copies of each, and then just 2 copies of Tenacious Underdog. And then the sideboard.
And we'll post this deck list right in the Discord channel.
So it's in our Discord right now. So if you want to go there, you can check it out. If you want to follow along and see exactly how we're sideboarding and what you think is going on. The sideboard is also very stock, like Duress, Disdainful Stroke, Negate, Shieldred's Edict, Glistening Deluge, Graveyard Trespasser, as well as Parasitic Grasp, which is the biggest question mark for me, I think. But and I think I had found this deck. It had been in some event somewhere, and it was part of a list of like decks in events. And I just like took it. It didn't seem like it would had a ton of work on it. And I'd seen it by multiple people. So it's like, okay, this is just a deck that people have. So
so usually when that happens, usually you can trace it back to like it either 5-0'd some MTGO league or did well in some MTGO tournament, and then everyone's just copying that deck list.
Hmm.
Um,
So I did not trace it back all the way. So
yeah,
I was lazy.
yeah. No need for that. I just
Yeah.
like usually when I see the same deck list that has like somewhat peculiar choices over and
Hmm.
over again, that's usually my assumption.
Like, okay,
May not
that's
even
why.
be may not even be true, but usually I
Yeah.
just assume like people are copying it from somewhere.
Hmm. So, Jeff, before we really get into the matchups, because I'm most excited about that, about figuring out like which matchups we think are good, how we sideboard
Yeah.
about against certain things, all that stuff. Um, I just want to hear your thoughts about playing the deck in general. Like, how have you liked it? What are things that you thought were cool? What are things that jumped out at you that you like? It seemed fairly, to me, run of the mill, but little interactions that you're like, oh, that's really interesting and cool that I've never actually put together in play before.
Yeah. So this deck is really interesting to me actually. When I look at this deck list, and certainly when I first looked at it, like there's just so much that I want to change. But that's why
Hmm.
it's important, to do what you said, like play the deck first, um, because I have internal biases, right? So, my standard, the thing we always joke about is first thing I do when I get a deck is I cut the worst card and add a land. When I was looking at this one, I was actually like, I'm all set to like do that as soon as I'm allowed to, ready.
Hmm.
And then I was like, wait a minute, 26? This is 26 lands and it only goes to 4? Actually, I'm good. I'm good with that.
Hmm.
I don't need to cut a land. If any or add a land. If anything, I need to cut a land. Um, not going to do that.
Yeah.
But like 26 is a lot of lands
Hmm.
for your curve stopping at 4. So kudos whoever built this deck. Is clearly a kindred spirit that hates losing to screw and is willing to lose to flood.
Hmm.
Um, so that was a nice thing. But the rest of me just like looks at this and is like, this deck is bad. I don't know why. And then
Hmm.
when I play the deck, I feel like the deck is bad. But then I've been winning a lot.
I know, right?
So I'm just like, is the deck bad? Like, I feel like I'm always like behind or not doing stuff that's as powerful as my opponents, but then I win.
Hmm.
And so I'm just like, is this deck bad or is this deck good?
It's also this interesting thing. Like when we had picked this deck, it was like the beginning of the month, and there was a lot of like Esper control around, which there still is a lot of Esper control. But I've been
Yeah.
running into a lot more Dimir mid range decks, like up against them,
Hmm.
which I was surprised to see. And I feel like I'm constantly running into not this exact deck, but different types of it.
Right.
So there's like something in the air that's also like make the best Dimir deck is just like in the ether.
Yeah.
And so this
Everyone had the same
experiment,
idea as us.
yeah. So this experiment is really interesting. And it's like, I don't, because like at the time we had chose this, it wasn't on the map at all. Like it wasn't,
Yeah.
besides like the Jace Breach one we were talking about a few weeks back.
I
We,
think I ran into it like a couple of times in my like many games played with the Phyrexian deck. Like I went
mhm,
from bronze nothing to diamond one. So, yeah, I don't know if I mentioned that. I did not end up getting to Mythic,
yeah,
um, but I did get to diamond one, and I did. My computer disconnected in a game when I was literally about to cast the winning spell, and that would have gotten me there. And then I lost a bunch more and wasn't
yeah.
able to like fight my way back.
Classic story, Jeff. Yeah, of course you were
Yeah.
about to do it, but you had
Ah.
computer problems.
yeah,
Right, right, right.
yeah, that never happens to me, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I ran into Demir mid range like maybe twice, and I was just
Hmm.
like, oh, okay, so it existed, but it certainly wasn't popular.
Because now it feels like I see it all of the time. And my deck feels like, or this deck feels like, usually usually like it's also the fact that like I've been playing this and there are a handful of cards that I don't want in my deck anymore, so when I draw them I'm like, oh god, Why do I get
Yeah.
another? Why are you playing so many of these? This is dumb. Like, you should not
That's
have this
definitely
many.
part of it. And then you end up winning and you're
Yeah,
like,
and you're like,
well, it's still dumb.
it's still dumb, but like, I was lucky. Um,
Yeah.
so, but some things that like people have been singing the praises of Siphon Insight since it came out,
Mhm.
and it snuck under my radar a lot. Um,
Yeah.
I did. I have copies in paper just for Dimir Rogues, just in case, because it seems like a fun card. But
Yeah.
in this deck, I really like it actually, because what Siphon Insight does is, if you're not familiar, it's a blue and a black for an instant, and you get to look at the top two cards of target opponent's library, exile one of them face down, and put the other on the bottom of that library. And then you can look at it and play it from exile as long as it remains exiled. And then you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to do that. It also, importantly, has flashback for one blue black. So it's a card advantage engine where you're just playing your opponent's deck, which brings a lot of really interesting things, especially in sideboard of like, how much do I want to play my opponent's deck? Do I want to take this out because their deck isn't really, none of their cards are any good? Or it's like, oh, actually, they have some great cards I want to steal. But using Siphon Insight in the combination with Liliana of the Veil is really nice, because you still have card advantage, but you don't have to have any cards in your hand. So you can discard your whole hand, and all you're just playing your opponent's deck. So like,
Yeah.
you just Siphon Insight their thing. It's in exile. You get to play cards from there, which I've been leaning very heavily into and have really been enjoying that interaction, which I'm sure other people have run into, but I didn't immediately look at the deck and be like, "Oh, that's great. Those work together. That's awesome."
Yeah. That's a really like bread and butter. It's been a really, really bread and butter interaction for me because
Mm-hmm.
this deck plays 4 Lilianas. And so, but it has powerful cards. Like it has some stuff you want to hold up, right? It has
Mm-hmm.
Urtai and it has Make Disappear. So sometimes you kind of get into this awkward thing where you have to discard something, but you don't want to discard a land because you want to make your land drops. You don't want to discard your counterspell or whatever. So you're like, do I just not activate Liliana? That kind of thing. And Siphon Insight I've found just so helpful, even just like hitting land drops. Like I'll
Mm-hmm.
discard my land and I'll steal one of yours and then I'll be fine.
Yeah.
Um, or even just like the less subtle but still there interaction of just discard Siphon Insight because it has flashback,
Mm-hmm.
like all that kind of stuff. Um, I've really enjoyed playing. Like it feels like cheating because your
Mm-hmm.
Siphon Insight gets you like 2 cards that aren't technically in your hand, and then you're just making them just they have to discard pretty much.
Yeah.
It feels like a 3 mana planeswalker shouldn't have a +1 that says your opponent discards a card.
Yeah. Exactly. It's also great just because it has instant speed, so you can hold up your Make Disappear during their turn, and then when they don't, you can Siphon Insight, look
Yeah,
for your land drop for your Liliana or whatever on your third turn, and
yeah,
it's it's great. The fact that you can play lands off of it is huge, because often I'll keep a hand that's land light with 2 of these and be like, I'll find some of theirs.
exactly. Yeah, I'll get there.
Mhm.
I think the card would be I don't know, unplayable maybe if it didn't hit lands,
That's true.
and it's
Yeah.
very good when it does. So it's
Mhm.
like that difference is so huge.
It is.
Um,
It is huge. Um, we also have like the very basic interaction that everybody knows about in standard and people have been using, but like Shieldred, the Apocalypse with anything that makes your opponent draw cards. So that's
yeah,
Fairy Mastermind likes it when your opponent draws extra cards, and Urtai makes your opponent draw extra cards, which is kind of his downside, but in this case can actually be an upside.
yeah,
Um, so that is pretty cool. Uh, just having that, I don't like that one nearly as much though, because it's very rare where if you can have Shieldred down and play extra spells, um, then you're already winning. So
you're in good shape.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd like this just like take Shieldred out of that equation. I've just really loved Fairy Mastermind plus Urtai
Mm-hmm.
because when you have Fairy Mastermind in play, Urtai, it doesn't. It's not that he has no downside, but it becomes like we each draw a card
Mm-hmm.
rather than just you draw. Like I counter your thing, we each draw feels so much better than I counter your thing, you draw.
Hmm.
It turns it like, because Urtai's, I traditionally think of it as just a tempo card. And this isn't really a tempo deck. It's like something I want to talk about later. It's like half a tempo deck, half a just mono black mid range deck. Eh,
Yeah.
But this is the tempo half. And sometimes it's like, ugh, I drew the tempo half of my deck and I really just wanted the mono black part. Or sometimes like, oh, I drew the mono black part and the rest of my game plan has been to tempo them out. But it just feels so good when you have Mastermind into Urtai because you just like keeps the gas going and makes them stumble. It's like the
Hmm.
perfect 1-2 punch if you were on the tempo game plan.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I will say that as we're talking about Urtai, this is one of the cards that I don't like very much. I don't like how many there are.
Yeah,
And
so I mean, when I first started playing, I cast Urtai when I already had one on the battlefield, and I was like,
mhm,
oh fuck me, yeah,
yeah,
right.
this sucks.
Forgot it was legendary. Like,
Hmm. Um, but as I've slowly been getting more into it, uh, the real reason you have Urtai in the deck is because it can not only counter spells but activated and triggered abilities. So you can, anytime someone does like weird attacks and you know they have like Iganju in their hand, Urtai is really good for that. And I was very lucky the other day where my opponent and I both had Shieldred on the battlefield, but mine came in first and I was at 2 life. And so then the way the trigger stack is that mine triggers first because mine was on the battlefield first. So that means their resolves first. And so I was going to lose my 2 life before I could gain 2 life. But I did draw Urtai as the card, and then their trigger was on the stack, so I could play Urtai and counter their triggered ability. So I didn't lose 2 life, and I didn't die,
nice.
which was it took me a really long time to figure it out because I was like sitting there being like, "Is there something I can do?" I was like, "Wait,
Yeah.
of course there is." Um,
Is it battlefield first or is it just active player? Like because it's your turn, yours goes on the stack first.
I mean, maybe it is active player. I was always assuming it was which one entered first, but it could be active player.
Yeah, because I think usually they don't want to have to track stuff like that. Like if the
Uh,
game's gone on for 5 or 6 turns, you don't want to be like, which
which
Shieldred
went
entered first?
first? That is actually a good rules question that I wasn't 100% sure about. And as they played their Shieldred, I was like, am I going to die? I have no idea.
Right. Let's
Um,
just see how it orders these and we'll figure
exactly.
it
And then I
out.
have to like very carefully read.
Arena baby.
Yeah.
I don't have to know.
I don't have to call a judge or I don't have to.
Yeah.
So, um,
Because I
but
know what my
anyway,
opponent's gonna think.
yeah,
I want to know what the judge thinks.
yeah.
Uh,
So anyway, um, that that made me like him quite a bit more because I really don't, even with all the other stuff that's like having Mastermind out and having things, I the 4 mana counterspell with a body that can get cut down, um, gets like really annoying after a while.
yeah,
Anything that gets cut down, I want a cut down free deck, which is hard
four
because I
mana
like.
gets cut down. Has happened to me and it's rough.
Mhm.
I do like Urtai because I find it flexible enough. Um, it's like just flexible enough for me, I think. Uh, but yeah, when they cut it down, it feels really bad.
Mhm.
My question for you is: have you ever targeted your own thing with Urtai?
I've thought about it. In that scenario, I was debating whether I should, because I didn't realize I could actually
Counter the trigger.
counter the triggered ability. Because I knew it
Mhm.
would work with the channel lands, but I knew those were activated, so I was like forgetting about the triggered part. So reading the cards helps you win games. Look at that. So, but that was the first time I was like, do I try to put another trigger on the stack so I can find something that does something when I already had the
Or
card?
like kill your own thing to draw a card to gain 2 life of yours. Oh, it would be the
No,
same
it would,
problem,
yeah,
right?
it would be
Yeah,
the
yeah,
same
yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, uh, but
If they were at 2, you could have killed their shield or forced them to draw. Yeah.
exactly, yeah, but but no. Anyway,
Yeah.
Interesting card, but we'll see how many I have in the deck at the end, if that
Yeah.
doesn't tell you
And
anything.
how many I have? Uh,
Yeah. Um,
yeah. So I have targeted myself with Urtai. I actually
okay.
did have to do it, but it was not an interesting story. It was like, I'm dead on board. I need to try to find something. I took an extra draw and I killed like a might token or something, and I whiffed and missed and I conceded.
Mhm.
So it's not a cool story, but
Mhm.
I have targeted myself. And when I did it, I was like, oh, this could target myself. Oh, okay, I get one more draw step on it. And then I'm
Yeah.
just like, how epic would it be if I find the removal spell off this?
It
Uh,
would be sick,
that was like
especially
fluff.
if you like use your planeswalker and then kill your planeswalker because you're like, that's not going to do anything anyway. And keep your
Yeah.
blockers, even though a might token is can't block. But anyway,
Yeah. And
Jeff.
it wasn't, sorry, it wasn't like a single target removal spell. I was looking for Glistening Deluge to
Oh, gotcha.
wipe all of their stupid little white humans off the
Hmm.
board.
Interesting. I have. I'll be interested because I have not dealt with any little white humans, but um,
Yeah, I think that's a tough matchup. Even though we have a ton of removal, they just like are built to beat removal.
yeah, and we're not a control deck, so we're not. We don't have good board wipes. Like, there's nothing good
Yeah,
to like.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And Shieldred's just not enough.
no, 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 no. So let's talk about matchups. I kind of wanted to talk about like archetypes as they come, and this is actually probably a good way to start because aggressive decks. So all the aggro decks, you're talking about. Are you talking about mono white humans?
Yeah, this was like I think it was splashing blue, but it is
Hmm.
essentially like mono white
Like soldiers, basically.
soldiers,
Okay,
yeah, humans.
because I
Um,
haven't seen that deck very much, but if you want to start there, it has a very similar feel to the other
yeah,
aggressive decks.
I've only played against it once or twice. I think I lost. I think it was twice, and I lost both, but they weren't exactly the same. One was mono
Hmm.
white, and then one was blue
Gotcha.
white. This has got to be why Parasitic Grasp is in the sideboard. Like
Hmm.
the original builder knew this was a bad matchup, and I think it is even with the Parasitic Grasp. Like we have a lot of removal, but so many of our cards are just so bad. Like Kaito's
Hmm.
pretty bad,
Hmm.
Liliana's bad,
Hmm.
Make Disappear is quite bad, Siphon Insight is bad. Like all of these cards are bad, and it's just so likely that you draw the wrong
Ones.
cards. You
Hmm.
can't side them all out. Like
You
you
don't have a
can't side
deck.
out all your bad cards here.
Yeah.
So this is definitely not a good matchup. Not to mention like Fairy Mastermind is bad. Like even the
Hmm.
creatures are just Fairy Mastermind's like one of your better cards in the matchup, but it's not good. It's like a
Hmm.
2-1 flash.
That like ambushes something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shieldred is kind of your Hail Mary. You have to like play it and hope it survives and can block stuff. But by the time Shieldred comes down, their creatures are pretty big actually. And
Hmm.
so it'll usually trade with something because you're too far behind to take the profitable block. You have to kind of take the
Take the
trade.
survival. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The survive or die trade. Um, and it's just too hard to try to keep up with cut down and go for the throat.
Hmm.
So basically, post board, you get better. You bring in Glistening Deluge. Again, that's probably why that's there too. Parasitic Grasp. But it just becomes this like, well, if I draw Glistening Deluge and they play into it and they don't have Invasion of Gobakon, I win.
Hmm.
If they any of those things aren't true, then I lose. That's
This
kind of
is
how the matchup felt to me.
yeah. I was assuming it was going to be bad, and I was looking at the sideboard, being like, yes, Parasitic Grasp is here for obviously mono white. Never ran into it. I haven't seen Invasion of Gobakon in like 3 weeks. Like
Oh
I
man,
have.
it's very good against us.
Oh, I bet. But
Yeah.
like I haven't. I was just like looking at these things, thinking that it would be a problem, and I have not. I've just not run into mono white, and so that
Thalia,
is.
also pretty annoying. The thing I hate the
Oh
most is
yeah.
holding up cut down and then their 2-drop is Thalia. You're like,
Mm,
this literally ruins everything.
yeah.
Like, I'm obviously gonna untap, play a land, and cut that down, but
Yeah.
like my whole curve is wrong now.
It's off, yeah, just because of Thalia, um, which is the funny thing as someone who does love Thalia, that you don't always
Mhm.
get to see that,
Yeah,
but you can
you don't see
feel
the
it when you're,
pain.
yeah,
Yeah.
until you have to like be really smart to be like, oh, you had that last turn, didn't you? Oh, sorry. Um,
It's like,
yeah, but interesting. Yeah, because as far as like even aggressive decks, like I've been running into mono red a lot.
mhm.
And so like our sideboard plan for mono red is basically just take out Liliana's because they're not really good against mono red. Anything that dumps their hand, Liliana's not very good at, especially things that go
Yeah,
wide. Um, and then I don't know, like put in like negate and then like graveyard
yeah,
trespass or anything that like gains life. You're like, okay, cool. Um,
yeah.
and hope you
I'm
can.
mostly just trying to get cheaper in this matchup. So take out Liliana's because they're 3 drops.
Mhm.
I don't love Urtai in
I
this
take out
matchup,
Urtai.
even though it can like trade with something. Like sometimes it's good, it'll trade with something and counter something, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, but generally it's just too expensive to be effective against mono red.
Mhm.
And you're just trying to be like as cheap as possible, even if that means bringing in duress sometimes.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Duress is totally fine because, you paid 1 mana to gain 3 life, basically. If you get
Mhm.
like a lightning strike or any of those. But uh, obviously, this is the matchup that Shieldred the Apocalypse is super important.
Yeah.
And
This one's better than mono white, I think, just because of that. It's harder for them to
mhm,
get Shieldred off the table, and Shieldred's more impactful.
mhm,
Um, it's still kind of the same thing. Like your make disappears are bad, Siphon Insight's bad. Like all your cards are kind of bad. But Shieldred, the Hail Mary of just slapping Shieldred down on turn 4 and crossing your fingers works a lot more in this matchup.
mhm.
Whereas it almost never works against mono white. Like they have to be pretty out of gas.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it is. Well, it is funny because like I don't hate Siphon Insight in this matchup just because um, sometimes it just feels like I'm stealing their stuff. Because the reason I hate Urtai in this is because I don't want them to draw any cards because they can't really do it other ways, and like they're just racing to get to the finish line. And so if I can not let them draw cards and like hopefully steal stuff from the top of their deck that's like, oh, that was you, it feels good. I know it technically doesn't really change anything, but it feels really good when you like see 2 burn spells and you get to steal one from them and put the other one on the bottom and you're like, you didn't draw either of those. Like that feels great. And in my mind, I'm
And
like,
then they
yeah,
then they play a mountain. They draw top deck, play
mhm,
a mountain. You're like,
you're like,
yes.
fuck yeah, I did it. So that's why I feel good about the Siphon Insights. But
How
I
do you
do
feel about
think
the times you see 2 mountains and then they top deck a burn spell that kills you?
I don't remember those times, Jeff.
Ah,
Actually,
smart. That's
yeah,
wise.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, those are the times where I'm like, yeah, sick of land. I needed one. And Shieldred.
Like, oh, unlucky. They had the burn spell.
Yeah. Oh. but um but yeah, so I think all these aggressive matchups are pretty not my favorite ones, but I think you are correct that like red is usually the one that's a little bit better because of the whole Shieldred situation is just like their worst nightmare. Like there's just nothing they can do. Um,
They like best case scenario for them is they throw 2 burn spells at Shieldred,
mhm.
which is pretty good for us.
It's really good. It also is a like everyone should know this because they've been playing Shieldred, but like don't block with Shieldred if they attack. Just
Yeah,
the
that's classic.
Recubus
Although
stuffs.
eventually you get to a point like probably in Diamond or Mythic
Yeah.
where people know that you know that, and so they're attacking even if they have nothing. But
hmm
you still probably can't. Yeah,
I think Shieldred's important enough that you shouldn't. Um,
yeah, unless you're gonna die or something, obviously. But
well, duh. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, and then also, as far as mono decks, aggressive decks go, I've been seeing mono black
Mhm.
because, as we will talk about shortly, probably after the beer break, what the meta really feels like. Um, but I do see a good amount of mono black or things that are masquerading as mono black that are actually
Interesting.
Dimir. Um,
I've played it against it exactly one time.
Interesting.
It the one match I had was a fairly easy win. Like I think my opponent kind of had not the best draws,
Hmm.
but they were consistently committing mana on their main phase to their evolved sleepers.
Yeah.
I'd be like, okay, with that on the stack, I cut it down.
Hmm.
That's
Which,
like a 1 for 5 mana trade or whatever,
yeah.
um,
Or
which is
like,
really hard to come back from, especially for an aggro deck.
yeah, because well, that's interesting because all my opponents seem to be really privy to this, and we're just having a standoff battle of like who's going to try to kill it first. Like with it's like I know you have a
Yeah, that's
handful
what
of
it
cut
should
downs.
be,
Yeah.
right? Because basically the problem is my opponent knows that I have Make Disappear or
Hmm.
something. So they don't want to play into it. So what they should do is pump their Evolved Sleeper, because that's part of what makes Evolved Sleeper good is
Hmm.
it's a standalone threat. You can develop your board without playing into a counterspell. Problem is
Yeah.
it plays into removal, which I'm
Hmm.
also quite likely to have. So I think the like trump card is that I'm gonna win the game when you do nothing. When
Hmm.
you attack with your 1/1 and just pass and play nothing, I'm gonna win that game. So you have to decide what's the lesser evil. Are you gonna try to overwhelm my counter spells and just try to curve out? Are you gonna try to like get me to do something and then play the better threat? Are you gonna pump your evolved sleeper on my end step or something? Like you got to do something with your mana. Otherwise, I just win easily. But I feel like they're just between a rock and a hard place because I'm sitting there with my hand as like make disappear, go for the throat, siphon insight, like fairy mastermind. I'm like, no matter what you choose, I'm going to be able to use 2 mana very effectively.
That's so interesting because my hand, when they go turn one Evolve Sleeper, turn two Tenacious Underdog, my hand is
Yeah.
always Urtai, second copy of Urtai, Kaito, and
Children.
yeah, and it's just like we're, we're like I don't have any that
Like I
relates
said, I
to
only played the matchup one time, and it just
yeah.
felt like, how can you ever win this? Like I could probably randomize which order I play these cards in, and like I'm gonna
Mhm.
win. Because, but I guess that makes sense when I have all of the 2 mana interaction against the aggro deck. It
It's
feels
yeah,
easier to win than when I
definitely
have a slow clunky hand.
yeah. I think the real way for Evolve Sleeper is just like jam your stuff and then it should get better as the game goes on where it's like
Yeah,
don't put the times I've had people like go way too hard way too fast where they like pump up their evolved sleeper and attack me and then I just like go for the throat hit like on turn 2 or 3. I'm like, why did you do that? Like you could
yeah.
have okay, that was weird. Or someone like makes their Mishra's factory a creature on turn 3 and attacks with it, and I make them sacrifice their creature, and I'm like, why did you? You could have
Okay,
just
thanks for the sinkhole.
yeah, that was awesome. Like
Yeah.
it's just it's just really confusing sometimes. I'm like, I don't,
It's
that's
because
really
they know how much you love Stone Rain, and
mhm.
they're
And
like, "Here
they
you go, Zach.
want to
You
make me
love
feel
Stone
good.
Rain." Yeah,
I was like, yeah, okay, I'll definitely do this. Um, so anyway, that's just like a PSA
yeah.
when
General tip about Evolved Sleeper is all you should almost never pump it in your pre-combat main phase to get an extra damage. Like
mm-mm,
unless your opponent is tapped out and you have nothing else. Like it's a specific situation. Generally, exactly what Zach's saying is like developing your board is way better. Um, if you're expecting a sweeper, that could be a reason to do it. Like,
mm, that's
oh, I
true.
don't want to commit another creature when I'm expecting a sweeper, so I'll just make this one a little better. I'm still gonna lose it, but like I don't lose the card advantage that way. But
Hmm.
generally, yeah, you have to have a reason to do that. Otherwise, like wait to see what your opponent does, and then if you want to invest your mana in it, do it, and you missed like a point of damage.
Yeah, which in mono black doesn't matter as much as mono red. Um,
Right. Yeah, you're not playing mono red. I think a lot of people who play mono black aggro are coming from a more like, balls to the wall aggro deck,
yeah.
where it's like every point of damage really matters. The strength of mono black is it's a little more resilient at the cost of some speed. So
Mhm.
you gotta play it accordingly.
Totally. Um, the card in this matchup that is really difficult to deal with is the Phyrexian engine thing. What is it? The one that like costs 3 and you can it's a 3/3 with medicine, lifelink, and ward. You have to pay life equal to its power, or it's a 7 mana 7/7 with
Yeah,
menace and lifelink.
yeah. Right. The prototype guy. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
the
big
prototype one.
snake thing.
That
I haven't
is
actually run into that card.
so that card is difficult to deal with because in our
Go for the
main
throat.
board
Yeah.
there are not even just go for the you also can't cut down it. So there are when you're sitting there being like, oh, turn 3, I'm going to kill whatever their thing is, and you play that and you're like, oh fuck. So I need them to have an empty board, and I need a Liliana, or I need an Urtai, which I'm not super stoked on. And that's turn 4, and they already gained a
Right.
bunch of
It's not
life.
the best. Yeah.
So it tends to be pretty rough. Um, so that one has been a thing that's actually because like usually these decks play like one of them, and it's like, oh, the like I used a bunch of stuff already, and they're like my Lilianas are kind of gone and things, and then I'm just like stuck with okay, whatever they play, they're gonna. I've had this where like they've gone into their graveyard, and I'm like, okay, when they get their Shieldred, they're gonna play it because they played Takanuma or something. I got to kill it with my Go for the Throat, and we're good. And then they get that card. I'm like, oh man,
Yeah. God, that's so
ah,
bad
that's
for me.
so bad for me.
Which
um,
incidentally is why most like if you see a professionally made control deck or something, it doesn't
mhm,
just stack 4 of the best removal spell
mhm,
because it introduces a hole where it's
mhm.
like, oh, if I play against the artifact deck, this deck looks really bad.
Yeah,
Whereas if you vary it, especially since all of the like 2 mana removal is of a certain power level these days,
yeah,
um, you maybe play 2 Go for the Throats because it's the best one, and then 1 of 2 other things. But um, I I do acknowledge that right now Go for the Throat is kind of like miles ahead of the other
mhm,
options. So that's why you tend to see people playing a lot of Go for the Throat. But it opens up that's like that's maybe a reason to even play that card over another 3 drop is it just doesn't die to the most common removal spells.
exactly. It's also a reason why. Actually, we'll talk about that in later bits. The last aggro deck before our beer break is Celestia Toxic, which you don't
I
see
have
here.
not seen it. Not seen it.
I have seen it, um, and it's not great, um, just because of all the same reasons. They go wide, and when I was dealing with it, like as if they're on the play and they can sneak down a Skrelv's Hive on turn 2, like it's pretty difficult to deal with,
Yeah.
because it's our deck can't close the game fast enough, and we're just not going to be able to make the board. We don't have the good like in this matchup. Obviously, we have our one board wipe and our sideboard, so we'll play both of those. The glistening deluge, but like it's not a good matchup. Um,
By that. Yeah.
yeah, so
Oh, one deck that
specifically
we
for
don't have here, I don't know if it is considered aggro, but Celestia Enchantments. I've played against that
mhm.
1 time.
I've also played against it one time, but it was a really bad build, so I didn't really count it.
I had a very easy win in my
Mm-hmm.
match. I think they're just a bit slower. They don't go quite as wide, so they are quite weak actually to
Removal, go
one
for
for
the
one
throat.
removal. Yeah, they're really bad against Go for the Throat and Cut Down. Like Cut
Mm-hmm.
Down, because their best card is Jukai Naturalist and just gets
Mm-hmm.
nuked by everything we do. And like they're weak against counter spells.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just very, especially since they love to like bring back their Angel
Mhm.
um, onto something that has no protection at all. So you're just like, okay, go for the throat. That, yes, it was briefly an 8/8 flying lifelink, but
Mhm.
I had no intention of ever letting that enter combat. Um, yeah, that's just I got from two very easy game wins where my opponent had draws that they weren't weak. They were just the
Mhm.
draws that the deck has. I get the impression that that's not a matchup you really have to worry about. Although,
Mhm.
like on the surface, you might think like blue black can't get rid of enchantments. Um, you just don't need to in this matchup. You just kill
Yeah.
like the way you would lose, I guess, is Hallowed Haunting, and I'm going wide with that.
Yeah,
But
they
that's so slow.
well, yeah, basically they would have to play Hallowed Haunting and then play a lot of the ossifications and stuff like that,
Yeah,
where it's like stuff we can't super deal with besides make disappear. Um, but I did play against them, and both my one Siphon Insight, which I cast twice, got their Hallowed Haunting and their Calyx. And so I
oh
was
nice,
playing their deck, and then I was attacking them and making copies of my Hallowed Haunting, and
love it.
that was rough for them. But
Yeah, my opponent had a card in their deck that could remove enchantments, and that's how I got like an ossification of the battlefield. Like I'll take that shield back, thank
mhm.
you.
So
At instant speed, no less.
this is a big thing, and so I think almost every matchup I really like having more. But I mean, some of these ones, the aggressive ones, can be rough. But I love having extra copies of uh, Siphon Insight. I want to have all of them. It's my favorite card to see. Like it just looks good all the time. I love it. I love it. I love it. Like I'm
Yeah,
almost always happy. I mean, besides like toxic, it's terrible. It's like so bad. I don't want any of that shit. But all the other ones, like even Mono Black, I'm happy with some of your
mono black,
stuff.
I would take it. I don't like it against mono white or like the humans build. It
Hmm.
feels so bad there because it's like I'm gonna get like a random 2/1
I
that I
play
don't
my
get
own
any benefit
Thalia.
from. Yeah. Whoops. Now everything costs two more.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's like not the best there, and I don't love it against mono red, though sometimes you can steal a burn spell and kill one of their creatures with it, that kind of thing. So it's not the worst, it just feels too slow. But against anything that's slower, I'm on board with this card.
Hmm.
And
It's
it's just fun. It's fun to like
it's so
steal your
fun.
opponent's cards and play
Oh, it's amazing. I
them.
love it. Uh,
Yeah,
anyway, Jeff, let's talk about some slower decks after the beer break, but we'll have to
let's do
get
it.
there first. So let's finish these and go on our break. This beer break is brought to you by our patrons over on Patreon.
That's right. You're already supporting the show just by listening, but if you want to support the show even more, Patreon is the best way to do that. Plus, you get to vote on your favorite co-host by either buying me a beer.
Or buying me a beer. So go to patreon.com/arena regulars to vote on your favorite host.
Or if you'd rather send us cool deck lists, tell us what we should do with this Dimir mid-range deck, that would be helpful too. The best place to do that is on our Discord channel. The link should be in the show notes.
It will be, but Jeff, we have another beer up this evening, and it actually kind of goes with the last beer we brought. So this
Oh,
is Time is the Distance. So that doesn't really make a bunch of sense. For a second, I thought that I read it wrong, but no, it is Time is the Distance. Uh,
hey man, that's how things are in Canada. We get made
yeah.
fun of for this, but you'll ask how far something is, and we'll say like 5 minutes.
I mean, like, that isn't that weird, I think. Like, they still say that in the States.
Oh yeah, that's all I see is the TikToks making fun of us
Oh,
for
really?
time being a distance.
How far? I I just meant like you don't say time is the distance. That's not a phrase Canadians use, right?
I don't think it's a phrase anyone
Yeah,
uses.
right. Okay, okay. That's
Yeah.
what I mainly meant. But sure,
But
yeah.
I
If
just
if
meant that we do use time as a distance.
totally, I mean, like it's like, oh, how long does it take to get there? No, because that's literally a number. How far
Yeah.
away is it? Is what you're saying? How far away is
Yeah.
that?
How far is this? You'll say 20-minute drive.
Yeah, but that feels very normal to me.
Because
That
we're
doesn't
answering
feel.
the question that like you're really asking.
Yeah, yeah. That's.
Usually you don't care about like the mileage you're adding to your car. You actually want to know how long it's going to take you to get there.
I mean, like, if someone told me in miles or kilometers, I'd be upset, like physically
I'd be like,
upset.
now I have to, I'm going to do 100 kilometers an hour on average. Let me like,
Is it?
just tell me how long it takes, man.
Oh, and just what would really happen? I would just like smile and be like, "Oh, thanks," and then just take out my phone and be like, "What is it?" Like,
Yeah.
because like
What's the
that.
answer I actually wanted?
Yeah, look up the distance in Google or the amount of time it takes, and then subtract 5 minutes, and that's usually what it is. Um,
Plus, mathematically speaking, time it takes to get somewhere is a perfectly valid metric, as they
yeah,
call it. So,
it is. I haven't seen any of those Canadian TikToks. I don't know what you're talking about. That's just normal people stuff. But
oh, good,
anyway,
good to hear. I thought the
yeah.
rest of the world was crazy because I was
No,
like, I'm gonna die on this hill. If Canadians are getting made fun of for talking about time as distance, I stand by that 100%.
I think it's a good metric. I also stand with you. Anyway, this beer, time is the distance. It is a Keller beer that was also brewed with Aveling Brewing Company, which is over on the East End. So these are two beers that Soda City used a friend or brewed with a friend, and a Keller beer we've had on the show. It's like a unfiltered lager, and so we'll be kind of similar to our Papa Gnu, but what the thing with Papa Gnu is that in his Sasquatchy hand, you can see time is the distance as the beer he's drinking.
Yeah,
Isn't that
yes, yeah,
cool? Yeah, it's right there. Ba-ba-da-ba.
yeah.
Anyway, this is a 4.8% beer, and it's time to crack it open and chug a lug this guy. Chug a lug? Whatever.
Yeah, I think it's cool that this is like the smaller, less hoppy version. Like this is a German lager, and then that's
Mm-hmm.
like the German hoppy IPA.
IPA,
And so in that one, he's drinking
this one.
the like
Um,
easier drinking version or whatever.
So we did kind of figure this out
Neat.
while we were doing the show. So it probably would have made more sense to do it the other way, but
Yeah.
whatever. Try things different sometimes.
Mhm.
Drink things backwards. Who knows? All right. Cheers, Jeff. Mm.
Cheers.
All right.
Mine foamed up a bit.
Mine as well, but I just went for it anyway. Let's talk about some other decks that we're running into with our Dimir mid-range monstrosity. Um, the other big things that we run into, see aggro decks and I see control decks. So
Yeah.
number one boogeyman out there, I think, is Esper Control. This is the
Yeah.
deck you see the most. It's the one you were probably expecting to hear about the most. It's no surprise. You will often see turn one, whatever Esper Triland comes down, and you're like, oh boy, here we go.
Rafine's Tower.
Yes, Rafine's Tower. Um, and then we know we're in a. This matchup, I think, is actually difficult. I, I want. Well, I think this is probably the hardest matchup. But Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, so I totally agree that this is the deck I see the most. And when did this happen, by the way? I feel like just overnight one day, Esper, like the memo went out that Esper Control is like the best deck in the format now. I don't know, but
It
everyone's playing
was.
it.
Yeah, it was. This is the biggest like amount that I've seen, but Esper Legends falling in favor and basically just like taking out the creatures and putting in board wipes is basically what
Mhm.
happened.
Yeah,
Because it feels like all those players just jumped onto the other deck. But it was I've seen this deck like the end of June, beginning of this month was like definitely happening, and now it feels like it's just the main menu. Like this is it. Like this is what you're playing against. Um,
yeah.
and I don't know. I feel like I have a hard time with this I've
Interesting. I think
not.
I have pretty close to a 50-50 against this. And I punted a bunch of matches early.
Mhm.
So I've like learned a bit. And now I feel like I'm winning against it a lot more. And to the point where I feel slightly favored. Like I'm not necessarily hoping to see this on the other side of the
Mhm.
table. That would be too strong. But I'm not upset when my opponent goes turn one Rafine's tower. I'm
Mhm.
kind of like, I know I'm in for a long match. That's
Yes.
one thing that I identify. But I don't feel like it's one that I'm probably going to lose.
Yeah, I don't think that it's something that I do think that it's fairly 50-50, but it's because like I sorry, that was me going back and looking at my untapped results and being like, actually, maybe I'm just remembering the losses way too hard because I always go 2-1, or I not always go 2-1, but like often. But it is very grueling and difficult, and I really, really hate the I don't have a counterspell for their Sunfall, and then when they cast Sunfall, I can't do anything about the token.
Yeah,
Like all of my cards, like Go for the Throat is so bad against Sunfall. Like,
yeah,
and Cut Down is usually the creatures. They're gonna Sunfall when there's more than two creatures on the battlefield. So it just becomes this like 3-3 that I can't kill. That I just like end up losing to this stupid 3-3 from this stupid Sunfall. Um and it just feels more tilting in my mind. It just gets so irritating.
yeah.
But I do
That
think
is super annoying.
we do have a good chance against the deck. I
Yeah.
just think game one is usually the one I'm like, oh, I think our
Game one
chances
is rough because you have a
game
lot of garbage.
yeah. And so the amount of garbage in our deck, I'm just thinking like right now our deck is not tuned for like control game one, where I think it
Mhm.
might be smart to be tuned for that, like side almost pre sideboard for control game one. Not too crazy, but like there are just so many cards that are not good
Yeah,
for
that would
control.
help. And I think if we did that, we'd be sort of squarely favored because I
Hmm.
feel pretty favored in post board games.
Yeah.
It's just game one that you just kind of have to not draw too many of your useless cards.
Hmm.
Um, if you can somehow manage that. I actually played yesterday. I had a mull to 5, and it turned out this was the matchup. And I was lucky where I just kept hitting land drops. And I basically went like land, 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 Mirex.
Hmm.
And then I
That's
just used Mirex and won the game.
yes. I have also like, and this is not a unknown quantity that like lands that create creatures are really good against control decks and in control decks, because
Mhm.
anything that wipes the board, anything that pumps out tokens is good. Um, but I Mirex is 100% the card that you need. Like if you can, usually the deck is or the matchup is whoever has Mirex wins the game. Um,
Yeah.
and whoever has then two Mirex wins the game.
Yeah.
So
Once you both have Mirex, it becomes like who's going to get the second.
mhm,
And you basically you want to hit land drops every turn. So my sort of shorthand for this is like the player who wins is the player who gets Mirex down and uh, the player who plays more copies of Siphon Insight in the
mhm,
game. Um, so both decks are it's certainly postboard are running 4 Siphon Insights, and
mhm.
it's just about who's like drawing them more or less.
Yeah.
Um,
It's also important, I think, that when you siphon insight into your opponent's siphon insight, you do not take it or you don't play it unless you
I
have to.
I often take it and don't cast it.
Yeah.
Um,
Because
but yeah,
like putting it on the bottom of their deck, like they have some shuffle effects, whatever, but like the amount of times people will siphon insight and then use my siphon insight immediately and being like, this is the card I got, I'm looking for something else, so
Like you
that
just
they,
gave me
because they put it in your graveyard. um it's just
yeah.
like, why would you do that? Okay, thanks. um it's just,
Yeah.
it's another weird reason why, like, in this matchup, I know Urtai is good in the sense that you can like counter planeswalkers and things like that, but like, I don't love a lot of these matchups can be like this one, not maybe not specifically about attrition, but like card advantage for sure. Giving your opponents more cards just is so bad. It feels just so bad that I
Yeah,
don't like
yeah,
Urtai
you
in this
don't.
matchup.
I don't. I think on the play, I'm okay trying to be the tempo deck
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, but generally, I've found the way to play this matchup is basically go into a control mirror
Mm-hmm.
where you are like still the smaller control deck in a sense. You're trying to win the game quickly. But don't be afraid to just play lands and pass every turn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think my biggest tip for this matchup for people is like don't be afraid to take lands off Siphon Insight.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what you want to be doing anyways. Because you just want to hit lands every turn. You want to find Mirrex. I love stealing their Mirrex. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Because it means they have fewer copies to find. Um, and they have stuff uh, like memory deluge and stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
you can't do it forever, but that doesn't mean that you have to just jam in the early turns and get totally wrecked by uh like any of their counter spells.
Yeah.
That's what you're trying to
This.
avoid.
Yeah.
So even if you play something and wait to have an additional 2 mana up, like just do it. Like
That's
you
most
have
of.
that amount of time.
Yeah. That's most of the game. Is like the game starts at turn 5 when you can play a 3 mana planeswalker and hold up 2 mana for make disappear, because they don't have any creatures ever. So,
It's
um,
so funny. Like another time I played against this deck again pretty recently. This was game one, and we're just like Siphon Insights are flying, right? And then my opponent is like casting Kaito and
mm-hmm.
casting Shieldred, and then they attack with their Shieldred, and I cast the Wandering Emperor and exile their Shieldred. It's like because there were so many Siphon Insights, we had swapped decks.
Mm-hmm.
And my opponent's like trying to kill me with the Shieldred, and I'm like exile it, and now making tokens to block and defend myself from their Kaito and like kill their Kaito and stuff. I'm just like, did I just like swap decks with you in game one? Because I think I got the better end of that
Yeah.
stick.
Does that mean that your deck is better than mine and I should be playing your deck, or what?
Wait a minute.
That
Yeah.
is.
But I was also like, you clearly don't have a lot of experience playing
Mm-hmm.
Shieldred because you never attack into the Wandering Emperor, my friend. Come
No,
on.
like that's like Shieldred's
I
good
have like
because
3 cards that are from your deck. Come on.
yeah, like
And I haven't played any of them.
yeah. Um, but yeah, it's. I think I just maybe I just don't love playing against control, and so that's why specifically this matchup is like, oh, here we go. Um,
Yeah, I feel very comfortable in control mirrors, which is probably why I play it this way. Like
mhm,
I'm less comfortable in the aggro versus control matchup because I'm being on the aggro side. Being on the control side, I'm fine with that matchup, but
mhm.
not super comfortable on the aggro side. So that's why I tend to try to sideboard into basically a control deck
Mhm.
and play that mirror match because I think that's where I'll get a better edge.
That's interesting because like I oftentimes feel like I wish my deck was closer to a tempo deck where I can apply better threats um, while holding up counter spells, which is a big reason why I want like more copies of Mirrex to be able to put into my deck, or like just start off with more copies of Mirrex just in general. Um,
Mirrex is incredibly good.
mhm.
That was one of my biggest takeaways from playing the Phyrexian tribal deck. It's like, holy crap, this card is good.
Don't you mean from talking to me at the beginning when I was telling you how good Mirix is,
I don't
or
remember you saying that.
yeah, I'm pretty sure I was like, this is the only reason you can survive control. Like when you're playing Phyrexians, is you need Mirix or Skrelv, but whatever. Don't listen.
I
Nobody.
don't think so.
Uh, I think that I told you. Whatever. Anyway, Mirix is really good. Um, but yeah, so either doing that where you're like playing that game of like holding up Mirix mana, and then you could have anything at flash speed or your counter spells. They don't do anything, so you just make a dude and do that over and over again. Is great. Um, but also weirdly, like Fairy Mastermind, because of the cards that are just floating around now, like Fairy Mastermind in a Fable the Mirror Breaker meta is a lot different because people are drawing cards a bunch. But Fairy Mastermind in a Siphon Insight and like a Memory Deluge meta is not like, it doesn't do what the card likes to do. It really just becomes the flash 2/1 that like you can leverage, but you have to pump. You basically have to decide: do I want to draw a card this turn, or do I want to make a Mirix, a little might token? And I think a
Yeah,
lot of the time making a might token is probably better than giving them another card, because
almost always. Yeah.
yeah, just like I just think, I don't know what it is. It's probably because control decks like cards. Every deck likes cards, but giving a control deck more cards just feels horrible to me. Where it's like, you already have all the stuff. I don't want you to get anything else. Where similarly, where I don't like doing it with um, like mono red decks, where it's like the only thing holding you back from killing me is that you don't have enough cards. So the situation of like, my favorite situation in this is where I can like play Liliana after Liliana and just keep making them discard cards. That's basically my favorite thing to do. It's like make you discard as many cards as possible and make you keep dorking around with this while I try to do other things. And
Yeah.
of course, Mirix. If I can just make a Mirix and then make them discard a card every turn, that's the best
I'm in.
game I've ever played.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in. Um, yeah, I still like Fairy Mastermind. He's ends up being decent at pressuring the Wandering Emperor and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
sorry.
So
I meant the Fairy Mastermind is really good as a flash 2/1, but I don't like
right,
it. Then it doesn't do
but
anything else.
the
Then
the
it,
card drawing thing.
yeah.
Yeah, it's weird because like this is a control deck, but they actually draw very few cards. Their card advantage comes mostly off Memory Deluge, which technically does not
Doesn't draw.
say draw a card on it anywhere.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's super weird that you'd think this card would be an all-star against control. And usually that's true, but I don't think any of their cards actually draw cards.
Mm-mm. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So anyway, it makes them really strong against Shieldred as well,
Mhm.
because of those reasons. So
I hate children in this matchup. That's
yeah,
that's like the first card to go for me.
because
It's too
like,
slow and
do
clunky.
you
And
take all 4 copies out? I don't take 4 copies out.
I usually don't, just because like I don't know, it feels like they're a bigger fish to fry sometimes. Um, but I have. I
Mm-hmm.
think recently I've been leaving like 1 or 2 in, especially if I play the control. Like sometimes they'll come back in because I'll play the control match game 2.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just have this long grindy counterspell war that I end up winning or whatever to go to game 3, and then they bring their removal back in, or sorry, they take their removal out, but they left it in for game 2 because I had all these creatures. And now then they're like, oh, they're sideboarding into control. Like sometimes you play that game and
Mm-hmm.
then just sticking a shield messes with them. But for the most part, I
I just think
want
it's
to take all
interesting
4 out, but I usually leave 1 in, I think.
because
I still like it.
I usually leave them in. I like having Shieldred around. I like it being like a must deal with threat, even if it's not something that they're actively hurting themselves over. Um, yeah, I just like Shieldred. I
It's
like
just
it.
like a 4 mana sorcery speed 4/5 in the matchup. It,
It helps me gain life because I draw a lot
you
of cards.
usually don't really care about that though. Like the control deck's gonna beat you either way, whether you
That's
gain
true.
6 life or not.
If I take two of them out and I bring two in graveyard trespassers, that's usually. Actually, do I do that in this matchup? I don't think I do that at all. Now I need to look at the list again. Um,
I mean, like
no,
sometimes they don't all come out because stuff like Go for the Throat's quite bad and has to go.
it's true. I think
Uh,
that's usually what happens is that I don't have anything else to replace them with. So I keep them in
right.
because I'm just bringing in Siphon Insight, Shieldred's Edict, Negate, Disdainful Stroke, and all the duresses and taking out most of the removal.
Yeah, you
And
just
then
don't have enough
and then,
slots to take out all 4
exactly.
Shieldreds. Yeah.
So there's nothing else to put in. So like I think I just usually keep all four and I don't even I just like
Oh,
don't
4 is way too many though
I
for
just don't
me.
have
It's like I
like
hate drawing it.
see, and I never feel like super bad drawing a Shieldred compared to an Urtai for whatever reason. And this is an emotional thing.
I prefer time this matchup by a landslide. Like it's instant speed. That's enough for me.
That's true.
I hate the 4 mana sorcery in this matchup.
The 4 mana, yeah,
Sorcery speed 4/5.
yeah. I will say it is really frustrating. I've this happened to me. I think it gets the same person like multiple times, where like I would like turn two Siphon Insight, turn three play a
Siphon
Kaito.
Insight again.
Oh wait, no. I
Obviously.
would sorry, I would turn three Liliana, then turn four Kaito,
Hmm.
and then as Kaito is phased out, they would Shieldred's Edict my Liliana, and it was just like that's so good. It's so annoying, but it's like
Well done.
ah, I can't choose. Like yes, I think in this matchup I'd rather have the Kaito drawing me cards, but like the fact that you don't give me a choice is really annoying. And like I
Yeah.
think that's an interesting thing that happens with Kaito. Um, that strangely forces you to sack your other planeswalker. I don't really know. It's a it's just a
It's the
thing that
right thing to do from your opponent's side too, because why give you the choice, right?
Mhm.
Maybe you would choose the Liliana anyways, but you have information they don't, so
Exactly.
don't give the choice.
Yeah, so Esper is like the the big bad, the deck you're going to play against. So I do think that if any changes are going to come to this deck, sorry, if when changes come to this deck, I am interested in like having that deck in mind the most. Um, which is usually what happens when you're building around a metagame. Is like what's the best play deck? Build your deck with that one in mind. This is
Hmm.
the deck that I'm going to have in mind. I think while trying to build towards a new version.
This is all just Zach trying to pre-justify him moving the 4th copy of Siphon Insight into the main deck.
It obviously is. That was immediately the first thing. And every single game I play is like, put the fourth one in. Why is it in the sideboard? Why is it in the sideboard? It should be in the main deck. There are very few matchups where I don't want 4 Siphon Insights. Um, so that's where we're starting. Like just getting you to know where my head's at. Um, we also have like I think there's I haven't really seen a Zorius control. I might have seen one, but Demir control is around.
Yeah.
Not as popular. Like if you're gonna play control deck, I think Esper is probably the way to go.
Dimir control feels like bad Esper. Like you're
Yeah,
just giving up on the good board wipes and the Wandering Emperor.
yeah, both of the Wandering Emperors. Yeah, um, so it's like I don't understand. Um, it just seems dumb. But 5 color control slash 5 color attracts a shit. Um,
Yeah.
is still a thing and is probably the only other option you might want to have that has a different game plan. Um,
Mhm.
that like closes games faster than the its Esper counterpart, which will take, you know, once they start once Esper turns the corner, it'll take 7 turns probably to like get you. Um, in 5 color control, that's not the case. It'll be about 3 probably when they go on the
Yeah.
beatdown.
I've played against this a few times. I think I've won every time. Um, I think this deck is just quite weak to a really well-timed make disappear,
Mhm.
whether that's on their invasion that tries to ramp 2 lands,
That's a good one.
or even on the 7 drop they end up trying to cast. It works
Well,
pretty well. Like,
I have to say that like there is something going on with the people playing this deck because they cannot hold their 7 for 2 turns to make it a 9 for the life of them. It's insane. They just 7 slam, just like windmill
wham,
slam, and then I windmill
make
slam, make
disappear.
disappear, and then they concede. Like
Yeah,
immediately because
yeah.
they're like, "Oh, he had it." I was like, "Well, why did you play into it? I wasn't even pressuring you. There's no reason you had to do that."
I'm sitting there thinking, like, well, they have 7 lands. This make disappear is pretty useless.
7 drop.
Yeah,
Also, there's nothing better than like Siphon inciting all their good cards.
I know. It's so funny in this matchup.
Because you're like, I guess I'll play Atraxa, you know?
I had one recently that was like Titan of Industry or Galta and Mavrin. I was
Oh
like,
my,
oh, spicy.
Galta and Maverick.
Yeah. I almost want to take that one, but I'm just going to take the Titan of Industry because
Yeah,
it's
because
actually going to be pretty good against
yeah,
you.
it's a known quantity too, but like
Yeah.
Galta and Mavrin. I will say, we never really talked about that card. Um, but I do think that the way that the abilities trigger is wrong. This is just drunk me talking now. That like the way it triggers is like when it attacks, it makes basically like um a big
Either a big
creature,
dino or a bunch of small vampires.
but it makes small vampires. I need to look it up now because I'm gonna fuck it up if I just try going into it. But it feels wrong. It feels like each one cares about the wrong thing. Like it should
Mhm.
care about it should care the small thing should care about the big stuff and the big thing should care about the small stuff, but it's like
Gotcha.
when you attack, it says create a tapped and attacking XX dinosaur with trample, where X is the greatest power among attacking creatures. So it makes a big creature depending on how big creatures you have, and then it makes
I
a
see.
small creature depending on how many small creatures you have, which I think
Yeah.
it should be reversed, where it's
It'd
like,
be cool if it was the other way. Yeah.
so it's like,
I also find it confusing that one of them enters the combat and the other one doesn't add them to combat.
yeah, because the vampires stay back as blockers,
Hmm.
um, but it makes as many tapped and attacking. Sorry, it makes as many vampires as you have creatures attacking. I just think that they were so close, but they missed the mark on this. And it is, I mean, I actually don't hate that one of them is attacking and one of them isn't, but I think that like you want to attack, make a big dino, and then attack and make a bunch of little ones. No, but it's always going to do like 12 though. Oh no, it's just this other attacking creatures. No, this card is frustrating.
Yeah.
I'm mad. I don't like this card.
Anyways, that's why I didn't take it. I was like, I don't know.
Yeah,
There's a lot going
I
on in this
I think
card.
they
It
designed it
seems
wrong.
bad.
Yeah,
Yeah. This card would objectively win me the game, but it's poorly designed, so I will not
yeah,
select it. Yeah, this feels like an easy matchup because we have pressure and disruption, and they're too slow to really do anything about it.
hmm
And like their removal spells and stuff are actually quite bad. Like it's fine. You can eat my fairy mastermind with your, 1 mana like enchantment removal. That's just
hmm
not that bad for me. As long as I don't like slam Shieldred and expect to win with it, I
yeah.
think I'm in okay shape.
And most of the time, like you're not playing where you're just gonna like slam Shieldred and just like sit there.
Mhm.
Most of the time they're like they have 8 cards that get rid of your planeswalkers. So don't expect to keep your planeswalkers on the battlefield for this matchup, but why should you? Actually, that's one card I forgot to talk about for Esper Control. That's really important. Is the fucking Esper Uncounterable Destroy
Yeah,
Anything card. That's the main
yeah.
reason you want to be Esper. Because
Always hits my planeswalker.
yeah, and you can't do anything about it.
Remember when we talked about that card being awesome, then nobody played it for like a year, and now
Yeah,
here it is.
isn't that insane?
Yeah.
Um, that's crazy that it took that long, but yeah, it is what it is. The card is still like $2 in paper, so it just seems crazy to me. I don't know. It just seems like this card's so good.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. It's so frustrating because I'm always holding up Make Disappear, and then
Yeah,
it's
and it
that
doesn't
I'm like,
work.
son of a. I fall for it every time.
Yeah, so then it makes me want like any card that can like bounce it back to their hand or like counter it but not counter it.
Mm.
Um, and we don't have
Imagine
access
if
to
we
it.
had
So
Reband. Oof,
I mean, there's that
now that's a
white
card.
there's that white card from Lord of the Rings that does that, and we don't have access to it. Makes me sad. Anyway, um, yeah, I think 5 color. This matchup feels super easy. Um,
Yeah.
like we feast on this deck. I don't think there's a ton of sideboard changes either. Like I'll bring in like Disdainful Stroke because everything they play that's worth anything is like
Yeah.
costs a ton. Um, and then
Sometimes I just like mostly take stuff out and I'm like, I don't know. Duress is
yeah,
kind of okay. I guess I put in a
that's
Duress.
true. I usually play Duress because Cut Down is so useless.
Right. Cut down has to come out. So then you're just like,
Mm.
okay, what is not the worst in my sideboard?
And like Duress will keep your planeswalkers around for a little bit. You get rid of their, so maybe you get rid of their ramp or their counter spells, or at the very least 1 mana see their hand. You know, like,
Yeah.
but
Not nothing.
not nothing. So, but
It's
it is
better than cut down.
yeah. I think it is true with this matchup though, like that if they try to go like um turn 3 they play the hedge dinosaur. What's it called? I don't remember the 4/4 that can't attack unless you have 7 lands.
Yeah. Is that even a dinosaur?
Oh,
Topiary
Topiary
Stomper?
Stomper. Yeah, I thought it's a dinosaur.
Oh, never noticed that.
Maybe I mean in the picture what I'm talking about, it looks like a dinosaur. I don't know if it's
Mhm.
actually type line says dinosaur, but if they
It's a plant dinosaur. You're
yeah, there
correct.
you go. So a
Yeah.
turn 3 Topiary Stomper into a turn 4, they want to play the Invasion of Zendikar. Um, just counter Invasion of Zendikar. I think that's the way to go.
Yeah.
Like, just wait for it. Like, don't like you can hold your makeup to make disappear and just watch them play Topiary Stomper and be like, that's fine. I don't
Yeah.
care. I will
You
wait
want
for
to,
the
yeah. I've always felt Topiary Stomper was so bad. It feels like no matter what deck I'm playing, when I'm up against this deck, when they take their turn 3 to play Topiary Stomper, I never care.
yeah. It's like sweet, thank you.
Yeah.
The reason that it like feels good for them is that Topiary or Stomper gets you to 4 lands on turn 3. Then turn 4, you have 5 lands because you play your land drop. Then you play Invasion of Zendikar, you get 2 more. It can attack the invasion, and that feels great.
Right.
So I understand the play pattern is cool and good, but
But
just
it's like, it's not that good. It's very easily disrupted. So
mm,
I don't know. I've never really liked that card. But
yeah,
yeah.
it's not great. Anyway, uh, so that deck is great. Always looking for a
Yeah.
nice
This
5 color
is
deck to feast
probably
on.
like what you're hoping to see. Is your opponent's on 5 color.
Yeah, especially like because they can just get screwed by lands, especially if you're like eating the top of their deck and like taking lands from them
Yeah.
or like whatever. It just feels good. Like
Yeah.
it's a
Like that's the thing, because we're stealing their cards, they don't even necessarily go for the top of us. they just ramp. So it feels like they have like a 3-turn window to win the game where they
Mhm.
ramped up to 7 drops, and we don't have access to their 7 drops yet because we're playing 1 land a turn. But then because they're doing that, they just get hosed by Make Disappear. It's like,
Yeah.
okay.
The one thing about this though is that taking a leyline binding is like not super great because it costs so much for
Quite
us.
bad. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still like a 5 mana card. Like
Mm-hmm.
it just don't like it's. I mean, you can take it if you don't want them to have an extra on, but like I'd almost rather have just like
Land.
a land. It also means that if you have a choice between like maybe a Topiary Stomper or like the Jetmir land, take the Jetmir land so that if you get a Leyline Binding later, it costs 1. And that ends up being like kind of smart. So like
Level.
you're looking for Jetmir Gardens or whatever, because that becomes something I'm really interested in stealing from them.
Right.
As well as like obviously Atraxa and like any of their good like finishers.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty much it for combo deck, or sorry,
Mm-hmm.
control decks.
Yeah.
I would say this is like that's the majority of the meta. It's all
This
Esper
is
control. There's some 5 color kicking around, but
yeah. And then like obviously the aggro decks we talked about earlier. So any deck we talk about now is just kind of like a random outlier we may have seen that like, is this here? I don't know. I saw it once kind of thing.
exactly.
Um so Jeff, you saw some random stuff. You saw
Yeah.
I want to hear about these decks because I don't know what they are.
Okay. All right. So I'm pretty sure these were just like a single player brewed this deck.
Mm-hmm.
They were having some fun on the ladder, and the decks weren't bad either. So that's why I remember them. So the first one that I really had a lot of fun in the match was against an opponent who was playing mono red Power Stones, is what I'm calling it. It's just a mono red deck that plays like all the big Brothers War artifacts. And so it uses like Power Stones to get
Power
there.
them out.
Yeah, and it plays like the Might Stone and the Weak Stone, and then it
Mm-hmm.
played Koth of the Hammer, and that was kind of like, or not Koth of the Hammer, whatever the new
Whatever.
Koth is.
Yeah.
Um, and so just the red is basically there for removal, and then
Mm-hmm.
it was playing these big artifact creatures, right? So I'm sitting there with like go for the throats and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
feeling like a jackass.
Mm-hmm.
And but the funniest thing about this matchup is who saves the day but our hero, Siphon Insight, because a lot of my opponent's stuff gives me Power Stones under the assumption that I can't use them effectively, or
Mm-hmm.
at least as effectively as my opponent can. But little do they know, I am planning on stealing cards from their deck to cast. So I actually won this match by playing 2 Skittering Battalions um, off of that I stole from them off of a
Yeah.
single Siphon Insight. I cast it on turn 2, took the battalion, cast it on turn 3, took another battalion, and then my opponent's just like handing me Power Stones left and right. And I'm like, oh, you are going to regret this, my friend. So I slap one down. It's like, I think I played it just for prototype.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, I hit you for 6. Your go. My opponent's like, okay, I play my Leviathan, kill your thing, you get Power Stone. And then I like bounced that with Ottawa and then played boom for 9 and just get like void. Like they're so dead. It's like, oh man, I'm sitting there with like go for the throats and all this garbage in my hand, but I just win the game because of a single Siphon Insight that stole their best card twice.
Twice.
And they helped me cast it. I was like, yes, that's why this card is the best. That's why I love this deck, just for this one card.
Siphon Insight. This has honestly taught me that that's like the best card in standard. It's like
Yeah.
so much fun.
It's so fun. It's so because any fun shit your opponent does, you get access to it.
Yeah. Like, and then it's also like when you're thinking of outs, you're like, well, I could draw Siphon Insight and then I could draw into their board wipe to wipe their board. Okay.
Yes.
I'm still
Surprisingly common play pattern against Esper. is
Yeah.
I'm gonna try and find a board wipe out of your deck because
Hmm.
you've had this Wandering Emperor. It's made like 3/2/2s. Like
It's like, and I need
I gotta
that's
wipe
the only way
this.
I can do it. Oh, it's that's awesome though. I love
Yeah.
that. Do you think we should be worried about this mono red Power Stones deck? Is this the new big baddie?
I think it was really awesome.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised if like I'd be surprised if
Hmm.
anyone else plays it. It just it feels like it has too many weaknesses. Uh, but it was I really appreciated what my opponent was doing, and they were really like as friendly as possible on Arena. It's like
Hmm.
hello, and then after good game when the
Nice.
game
Okay.
was over and stuff.
Good. All right. So they're
Um,
a solid person. That's
yeah,
great.
so shout out to you, Mono Red Power Stones opponent. Love your deck. Hope you can get to Mythic with it or whatever your goals are.
You're fighting for, yeah.
And the other one was one that I ran into that spoke to me on a personal level because it's a deck I've like considered building so many times, but it was Jund self mill land theme, which has a special place in my heart because I built a
Hmm.
deck like this back when the Gitrog monster was in standard. And it was all about milling myself, but I mostly cared about milling lands.
Hmm.
Um, this deck does the same thing, plays like Titania and Argoth and stuff, and then it's obviously centered around like Soul of Windgrace, being able to
Hmm.
bring that stuff back,
I mean,
actually get a payoff for all of your land nonsense. Um, this was like more straightforward. I just pointed removal at the Soul of Windgrace every time they cast it or countered it, and then the rest of their deck didn't do a ton.
mhm.
But I just wanted to like I saw them mill over Titania and I was like, yes, I already like where this is going.
Mhm.
And I saw them play Jund and I was like, okay, so I'm expecting Soul of Windgrace
Mhm.
as the only possible reason to do this. Um, and so yeah, it was unfortunately a bit weak just because it centered around one card that's easy to deal with, but loved it nonetheless.
Yeah, that's nice. Um, yeah, I think the only decks I've seen that were like, oh, that's kind of interesting is like there's a Boros um, play from exile deck. Uh,
Hmm.
if you've seen that, so it's like Boros Paya, the new Paya that like or Pia, I guess. I think. Let's see.
Oh,
Oh,
P.
yeah,
Of course.
Pia. There you
Yeah,
go. Yeah,
yeah.
I
Like
call it
Chandra's mom.
yeah Pia Nalar, but
Yeah.
you say Pia Nalar anyway. Console of um, whatever. Um,
Actually, don't
so
even know what that card does.
yeah, so it's like a Boros creature. Sorry, console of revival. Here I found it. So it's a Boros 2/3, and it says Thopters you control have haste, and then it says whenever
Mhm.
you play a land from exile or cast a spell from exile, create a 1/1 Thopter artifact creature token with flying. So the whole deck
Nice.
is just like all the different cards that are like reckless impulse and like the other one does the same thing.
Oh, I think I have played against this. I thought it was
Yeah,
just like a one of kind of homebrew
I think.
thing.
I mean, like I think that maybe I mean it could be the same person, but probably not.
Yeah.
Um, but I did run into this, and it was like cool enough that obviously we can easily just kill their Paya and like not have to worry about it. Um, but having a bunch of hasty 1/1s that attack our planeswalkers is not something we really love. And then having a bunch
Mhm.
of just creatures in general is something we don't like. So
Yeah.
it it's just a cool deck. I liked someone like finding another like it's just another deck where like the aftermath cards that we kind of were just like, meh, this is whatever, ended up being kind of
Mhm.
interesting. So I'm like, I'm just happy with that. Like, sick. Yeah,
Love it.
you did your thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's basically our standard excursion with this Dimir deck. I think it's fairly obvious what I'm going to be doing with this deck or where I'm going to start moving. Jeff is a bit more secretive, I think, with his ideas. Um, But
I
I'm
just
excited.
have so many different ones, and I don't know which
Mhm.
one will end up being the one
The
I
one.
like the best. I know pretty much every version will contain Siphon Insight.
Yeah, I think this has shown me that Siphon Insight is a must play in standard right now. Where I'm like, I'm really uninterested in playing any deck that can't play Siphon Insight.
Yeah, it's
So
just the most fun card in the deck too. So it's like
yeah,
I want it all the
the
time.
amount of times I keep like two tap lands, but because I have two Siphon Insights, I'm like,
that's
it'll be good.
that's
It'll be
so
good.
slow.
I know.
I love it. It's so tempting. I usually mulligan that, and then I feel sad. It's like
But
Shipwreck Marsh, Siphon Insight.
it's
You're like,
Siphon Insight.
come
You're
on.
like, okay, I just need to draw one land and I'll be happy. But if I don't, I can Siphon Insight into more lands.
Yeah.
um, but no, I love that card, and I've been really enjoying this deck.
Me too. Yeah.
And doing well. So that also helps a lot.
Right. And both of those things surprised me when I just looked at the deck list. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's like Shieldred and good for the throat and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this deck looks, you know, like there's a lot of room for improvement, and maybe it won't be that fun, but we can get there. And it's just like, no, I'm winning and having fun. Okay. I like the
Mm-hmm.
start.
Yeah.
Um, now it's time to rip this thing apart and totally ruin my win rate.
Yeah, exactly. So you'll have to stay tuned. I think we'll be back in a few weeks, show you what we did. Gonna be fun. Anyway, Jeff, is it time for last call?
Yeah, I just want to say like my TLDR on this deck is um, my two main thoughts are one, it's so bad against go wide decks. Like it's awful. Like
Yeah.
if your opponent makes like three or more creatures, it's so hard to win. Um, but number two, it feels like it's two different decks kind of mushed into one. It's like a blue black tempo deck meets a mono black mid range that splashes blue, and the card that like brings them together is Siphon Insight, which is probably why we like it so much, because it's reasonable in both shells.
Mm-hmm.
But then like yeah, your Urtais along your Shieldreds, even though they do combo, like you said, it just feels a bit weird.
Yeah.
Like I rarely want both in the same matchup.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually like I'm either interested in the tempo kind of get the job done and keep you off balance game plan, or I just want to slam a big powerful card and say deal with it. And it happens to me that I want Shieldred and I draw Urtai, or I want Urtai and I draw Shieldred, and I'm just like, oh, come on.
Mm-hmm.
Or I, you know, draw my classic hand of land, 2-drop, Urtai, Shieldred.
Yeah.
Give me a break. So many 4-drops.
Yeah. And and I guess, yes, I think that's right. And I think in my mind, it's almost always why the fuck Urtai is so annoying. Why did I have two of them? Well, I know Shieldred's gonna die, so like having a second doesn't make me feel bad. Um, but having four drops in your opening hand sucks. So
There are certainly too many 4-drops in this deck.
yes. So
It's about which one we cut, and I have a feeling we might be cutting different ones.
Oh, I just spilled my beer.
I was going to say good save, but
no, not good save. Anyway,
it looks like a good save on camera.
no, I could lie, but no. Anyway, shoot. That's fine. There's still a little bit left, so I saved some of it.
Okay, there you go.
It's enough for the last call. Now I'm all sticky. Anyway, doesn't matter. Oops. Let's finish it. I don't think I can talk about magic anymore. Let's
Okay.
go. Let's talk about beer. We always rate our beers on a scale of bronze to mythic, just like the tiers in Arena, and it has nothing to do with whatever tier you are in currently. It's just a fun way to rate beers. So don't feel bad when we say that bronze beers are trash. They're horrible. We can't finish them. We spit them out on the ground, like you almost want to just throw them back up.
Yeah. Silver beers are just boring. They basically don't have anything going on. So your Budweisers of the beer world.
I actually think we should just add also just bad. Like there can be bad beers. They're like this is bad, but like I'm still drinking it. Um, Compared to like
I'm fine with
bronze.
that because sometimes I want to label something silver because it's bad, not because it's uninteresting.
Yeah. So we should just add bad is also silver. Like that's
Okay,
fine.
let's do it.
Um, just because it's true. Gold beers are fine. They're like meh. You don't really have anything against them, but they're not really. You just don't think about them. They're just like there.
Yeah, yeah. Platinum beers are totally solid, and you drink this again.
Mhm. Diamond beers are exceptional. You really like them. You drink them often, and you show them to your friends.
And Mythic, these are, of course, the best of the best. These are the beers that, you know, you really need after a long night of getting your ass kicked at Magic.
Yeah. Oh, I need some more mythic beers for that. I'm drinking so much of my home brew recently that, which is actually not bronze this time. Hooray!
Hey, that's a win.
That's a win. Um, it's probably just a silver. Anyway, so tonight, Jeff, do you have the beer that you will be picking?
Yes.
I think it's fairly clear, but here you go. Three, two, one.
I liked Time is the Distance, actually.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Why are you always surprising me?
I gotta mix it up on you.
You always do that. I got Papa Gnu. Tell
So
me
where do we
why.
want to start?
I want to hear why you were not as interested in Papa Gnu.
Okay, so it might be a little bit personal,
Okay.
but when I went to Sawdust City semi recently, like my friend has a cottage out there, so I was visiting them, and we stopped at Sawdust City on the way, and I ordered the Papa Gnu, so I actually have tried it before,
Right.
um, but I had it at the brewery on draft, and it was awesome, and that's why I ordered it this time because I was like, we have to do this on the show. And as soon as I took one sip from this one, I was just like underwhelmed.
Mm.
So I don't know if it was I'm misremembering what it tasted like, or if it's just that much better fresh on tap, like right there. Um, but I think it's just a expectations thing. I was
Gotcha.
expecting to love it more than I did because I'd like loved it last time.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I thought it was nice. It's not. Neither of these are super overwhelming. I think. Obviously,
Yeah,
they're both like versions of like German lagers, but the Papa Gnu was like stronger and did push me over a bit. I was kind of.
yeah.
I'm feeling it. Obviously, I spilled my beer on my pants, so um, which means it's great. Uh,
I also wonder if like I tried them in the other order, would my choice
feel
have been
differently.
different? Or if I didn't know it was second wedge. I don't know. There's a lot going on
Oh,
mentally with
second wedge.
it. just
So
just kidding, just kidding.
no,
Uh,
yeah, second wedge was not great. I'm sure the people are nice, but um, their own beers, we tried everything that they make, and it was nothing was good. Um,
yeah, I think
sorry,
it was mostly just like I had an idea in my mind
for
of
sure.
what this was and what it tasted like, and it tastes a little different from that. It was
Yeah,
a little more like um muted relative to what I remember.
I think yeah, and it also felt very muted to me as well. But they both feel very similar in my mind.
Yeah,
just
they
think,
do feel similar.
I just think the Papa Canoe feels like the like bumped up version a little bit, but
Yeah, that's what it tastes like to me.
you
Uh,
know, Papa Canoe feels like a platinum, like a
yeah, I actually had them both at platinum,
mhm.
and I just picked this one because it didn't let me down in the
Yeah,
same way. I was expecting
totally.
Papa Gnu to come in here with a diamond rating.
Gotcha. And I was like probably thinking solid. Time is the distance. I think it's also platinum, though like it's not my favorite Keller beer.
Mm.
Um, which we know is probably one of our silver series, which shouldn't be silver, and then maybe we should completely rethink our entire silver series thing, because sometimes it's like this beer is very good. Like I go and buy this
We're literally
often.
pitting it against bad beers.
So so there's that. Um
It's too late, man. Too late.
so I
We
know,
just
I
have to
know.
be objective and not crown out the champion too early.
But so then it's hard because it's like this is not as good as my Keller beer that I like the most. If I say my Keller beer that I like the most is silver, then this has to be lower silver, which
It's fair.
which
Yeah.
is like really not doing justice to this beer, which is just delicious. So I think platinum's a good place to put both of these. Very solid. Good
I think
stuff
it's just
though.
the reality is that your silver beer is actually diamond.
I think that's more of it.
That's more the
Uh
takeaway.
yeah. Is that just like, wait, okay, so just because it's made in mass doesn't mean it's bad.
Yeah.
That's actually the end of the podcast. That's like our that's the
That
final
was the point of
finale.
the silver series too, right? Like
Hmm.
let's find some hidden gems or like let's give these beers a shot. Let's not count them out just because they're mass
Yeah,
produced.
because some of them really do
Well,
suck, but some of them are actually
some of them are good, man.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sapporo,
Oh.
that's a fucking horrible beer. Stella, that's a good
Good one.
beer. That's a
Yeah.
really good one. Anyway, Jeff, let's go to closing time. So this has been a long one, but as always, you can find us at Arena Regulars on Twitter and Instagram.
You may also find us on Arena itself under the username Arena Regulars Podcast.
If you want to talk to me personally, you can find me at Zulberg, that is ZEULBERG on Twitter and Instagram. But Jeff, where can they find you?
Best place is in the Discord channel. I will be at Regular Jeff there, and the link for that channel should be in the show notes.
Also, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Spotify. Look for us on YouTube. Leave us a comment. All that really helps us out a lot. We love to hear your feedback, and so do the algorithm people. So it helps the podcast out a lot as well. This has been Arena Regulars,
reminding you that the best card in Standard is Siphon Insight.
good night. All right, that's fine.